As a little extra to my cuttings and propagation video, I thought of something else overnight which might help you to get along with your cuttings if you do want to take them down the allotment. Because bearing in mind, the cuttings that you've taken will be fully grown trees. So I thought on. Now, if you look at stock in your own garden that's had a rootstock on it, and this one here is a graft, and it's a quince sidonia, you'll see that growing up from here from the roots are these things called suckers. Now the suckers here have come from the dwarf rootstock. So basically if you take cuttings from these in the same way I showed, you can see there's a bud there, here, and you take cuttings quite low down on these suckers, and you can treat them the same as your other cuttings, put them in a tub, label it dwarf rootstock, and away you go, grow them, and these will then become your dwarf rootstock. Then all you've got to do is the same as me. Over the next couple of years, as they grow to the right size, look up how to do the grafting, and there are a number of people on YouTube, including Woody's and his channel, who's looked into grafting. So you should be able to, within a few years, do your own simple grafting and have dwarf rootstock on your allotment. So I hope that solves a problem that if you're going to get copies of, that's if you like clones of existing fruit trees, you should be able to go by allotment rules, and if you follow that in a few years time. I know it's slow, but at least you're doing that yourself, and it's a project, and I think it's quite exciting. So here goes, I'll have a go. So I'm interested in, I've got 1, 2, 3 and some thinner ones behind if I want to take them as well. So I'll take about half a dozen. So all you need is your trusty secateurs, bypass secateurs will do, and then you need to cut them down as low as you can to where they come up. So that's what I'll be doing next, just snipping off my cuttings, and these of course, as I said, are dwarf rootstock cuttings because they've come up from the dwarf rootstock. Perfect then for grafting to your cuttings that you took that I showed you on my video earlier. Once we all learn, including me, how to graft your cuttings and the dwarf rootstock together, which might take a couple of years, but hey ho, that's a project in gardening, isn't it? Here we have a similar sucker growing from what is actually a plum tree. Again, this will be from the dwarf rootstock, so there you go. So you've got yourself dwarf rootstock cutting to take, as I said earlier, put them in a separate tub, label them dwarf rootstock and where they come from, and start growing your own dwarf rootstocks at home. Of course, if you've grown a dwarf rootstock tree in your garden and it's failed as some have in mine, I just let the dwarf rootstock stay in the soil. I don't know what it'll grow into, but that means I've now got a stock here of branches here which are all dwarf rootstock from a tree. In this case this was a plum tree that didn't work, so basically I can use any of these stalks as a dwarf rootstock. So basically that's me sorted for grafting for dwarf rootstock. Right, better be safe first. I've got my dwarf rootstocks cuttings here, which are all from dwarf rootstocks in my garden. I put them in water straight away, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to be using, in this case, a simple plastic tub here, but you'll have to drill some drainage into it, so I'm going to use my mini drill, and basically that's why I've got safety glasses on, and I'll put dozens of little holes underneath it and then put some of my compost in, and then it's time for this. One or two of you have asked me about this one. I got this one from Wilco's. Apparently it's made from seaweed. It contains a chemical naphthyl acetic acid or something, but it's comes from a natural seaweed extract. I've also seen them in Poundland, appropriately priced. You don't need to use much, but there you go, that's the stuff I should be putting underneath when I do my cuts on these ones. Okay, so with your cuttings taken, you need to look along the cutting closely, and you'll find little tiny blips, if you like, they're buds sticking out. What you need to do is cut just underneath a bud, right underneath a bud, not on it, below it, and straight across. Then using your bypass secateurs, scrape some of the bark off just up from where you've made the cut. And you can make these cuttings, use good wood. If you come across a part on the cutting which is bad like this and you don't need to use that section, and just carry on, and basically even with the green cutting here that you've made from this root sucker, do the same process, and then into your tub, which I've drilled underneath as deep as you can. At least half of it should go under, because that's where your roots are going to form, and the end of it, only the end of it's dipped into your root hormone powder. Shake off any excess, okay, don't leave it on the sides. So only need the root hormone powder where you've cut it underneath, and maybe along, just touching the wounded parts along that you've done. As I've done with all my other cuttings, I keep them in water. You can even keep them for quite a few days like this if you are busy. My cuttings even survived the beast from the east in ice. They're still alive. These dwarf rootstock ones, here we are. I'll show you one I've done here. If you see there's a bud there, and I've cut it just below the bud across, and I'm going to scrape some of the bark off on the sides on two places. At the top of it you cut it above a bud and angle it about 45 degrees, as you can see there, okay? And make sure you put the cutting in the right way up. You can tell which way is the right way up because you should see the buds slightly pointing upwards, okay? So don't put the cuttings in the wrong way around, okay? You should see the buds angled slightly upwards, then you know you've got it in the right way, okay? Right, there you go. You can see I've now wounded it on the side. I've scraped some of the bark off in two places. I'm ready for dipping it into my root hormone, and then straight down. This one needs to go over halfway down, okay? So I'll only leave about a third of it sticking up, okay? And no matter how long it takes, it may take 1 or 2 years to be potted on, but then I've got my own supply of dwarf rootstock, haven't I? So just for garden projects, to me it's quite exciting to have a go at doing things yourself. You learn that way. I've never done it before, I've never done the grafting thing before, but I know on other people's channels, like Woody's channel, there's some information, so I'll look it up myself. Once you've got your cuttings in your compost as such, and I put these in sort of radially, then put your label on with your date, and you can, if you wish, cover it with this sort of plastic. I've used guinea pig wood shavings if you want. If there's going to be risk of frost, so I'll probably do that, cover that. Make sure you put a hole in the plastic, don't let the compost dry out, and let them grow. And if they get too big, once they've rooted, as I've said with you earlier, after a few months you'll know if they are rooted, because if you try and pull them up gently they'll resist pulling up. That means they've started growing roots, so you'll have roots on your rootstock. So good luck with your hardwood cuttings. These are all pear trees cuttings. I took Williams pears from my own garden. Unsuccessful in my garden, it's too small. But if I put them on my own dwarf rootstock, which is these ones here, in a few years' time, as long as I keep both sets alive, that's the rootstock and I'm going to graft, I may well be able to learn from some of you other YouTubers how to join them together and make my own dwarf fruit trees. And don't forget that your dwarf rootstock fruit trees are suitable for the allotment. So what I showed you on my earlier one is relevant as long as you get your own dwarf rootstock sorted. And my little friend up there agrees as well. Here he is there enjoying a bit of apple.